Peter B. Collins is a retired syndicated radio talk show host and podcaster. He was recently inducted into the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame, and I am thrilled to have you back. I really am. Welcome, Peter B. Collins.
David, thank you very much. And I love the intro. I've joined you later in the program, and I got a subway wall. That is so cool.
You got the subway wall?
Yeah.
Ah. It's the summer. I'm learning After Effects because why have relationships with human beings when there's technology that you can never use, that you should be exploring. How are things before we get to Afghanistan, how are things in the Bay Area? You're in the Bay Area, right?
I am. I live just north of San Francisco in Marin County, and our skies are a little smoky. We're quite a distance from the Dixie Fire, which is in the northwest part of the state, closer to Mount Shasta. And it continues to rage. They say the containment is 25%, but I think there's some wishful thinking there. And there is a major fire in Oregon that has been declared extinguished. But it's hot and dry in the West this summer. And of course, we're on self-imposed water rationing, but I did sneak in a shower just before the show.
I appreciate that. I didn't want to say anything about last week, but is your microphone scraping against your collar?
Let me stop that. Here, I'll wrap it around my glasses, and that will prevent that. I'm sorry.
I apologize. That's my little OCD there.
It's okay.
Okay. No, that's... Oh, I think it's working now.
It'll probably work if I don't shake my head too much.
Right, and don't blink, please.
Yeah.
Before we get to Afghanistan, there is a recall election coming up next month. It's already started, I believe. Gavin Newsom might be recalled. Who is up against him?
Well, let me first just explain that the California recall measure was passed by reformers 100 years ago. And it's faulty in two ways. One is that it doesn't require any wrongdoing by the governor. There's no Me Too claim, there's no fraud or, serious malfeasance. There are policy differences that people have with Gavin Newsom. The other big flaw is that the voters are given a two-part ballot. One is, should the current governor be recalled, yes or no? And then there are 43 people listed for you to choose from. But it is not required that any single candidate on the second list achieve a majority. And so we could have a Republican governor who wins with 25% of the actual vote. So this boils down to turnout. Do Democrats see a significant threat? Do nonpartisan voters like me, we're called NPP, no party preference? Do we see this as a power grab by Republicans who are doing this because they're so desperate they know they couldn't defeat Newsom next year when he is up for re-election? So it is a little scary because the polls show that Democrats are kind of blasé about it.
Well, it's hard to get behind Gavin Newsom, isn't it?
Well, not actually. I mean, I have some issues with him, but I've known him since he was on the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco. Then he became mayor. He slept through 2 terms as lieutenant governor while Jerry Brown stiff-armed him. And, then he got his shot. He is a fairly progressive, but he's a pro-business guy. And he has disappointed progressives on environmental issues because he talks a green game, but he first imposed a moratorium on fracking. And then when COVID distracted people, he permitted 100 new fracking sites in the state. He's now sworn off it, but it's by executive order. The legislature is at fault as well. While it's democratically controlled in both houses, the corporate influence is quite extreme, and Chevron in particular, among the oil giants, has outsized influence in Sacramento. And so the legislature has failed to send him bills to restrict fracking, even to put zones around it to prevent fracking from occurring in residential areas, and things as simple as that. So we do have to share the blame with the Democrats in both houses in Sacramento. That said, Gavin Newsom entered office and issued a moratorium on the death penalty, which is something I support him for. He overall did a good job in managing the initial onset of the COVID crisis. He did grab some power, but there was a vacuum because the legislature basically abandoned the state capitol. So they ceded power to him and he took it. That became the pretext for the angry Trumpers who gathered the necessary signatures, and they have legally qualified this recall election. So the top Republicans are Larry Elder.
Let me ask you about Larry Elder for a second.
Sure. Well, can I describe him to people? He's an African-American conservative radio host who has operated from Los Angeles for many years, and he does get good ratings. He's a right-wing shock jock.
Who refuses to release his tax returns, which speaks to what we were talking about last week. There was an article in the Los Angeles Times about Larry Elder historically not telling us where his money comes from. And they interviewed in the Los Angeles Times a consultant who said radio talk show hosts can be purchased. They're paid to do advertising reads.
Yes.
And then they are also paid enormous speaking fees.
And book deals.
And book deals.
Mm-hmm.
I maintain that this is payola, that Larry Elder is, I have no evidence, this is just my theory about AM radio, that people like Larry Elder are parroting talking points as though they're commercial reads for like Campbell's soup that he just puts into his dialogue, his monologue, but it's paid for by the same people who run the Cato Institute and the Heritage Foundation, and they pay him in other ways, speaking fees.
There's clearly grift and graft, and technically it does rise to the level of payola, because the legal definition of payola is money that is received that is not properly declared. So, for example, if he declared, I took $100 grand this month from the Heritage Foundation, and I'm going to now read 6 talking points from the Heritage Foundation website, that would actually be legal. Right. But because it is undeclared, and technically the radio stations are supposed to put it on the commercial log, that it's either in kind or cash received in exchange for the delivery of a message.
I'm always amazed that nobody's looking, well, I'm not amazed anymore, that nobody's looking into how radio talk show hosts are paid enormous speaking fees and then suddenly parrot the...
So you got a problem with success?
Yeah, I do.
You want to penalize successful people in this country?
Well, these are the same people who wanted the minutes of Hillary's speeches before Goldman Sachs. But suddenly they won't tell us who's paying them to speak for ungodly sums of money. Okay, Afghanistan, sir. I'm going to assume that you saw this coming 20 years ago.
Can I go back even further, David? Because when I was 11, my father took a trip to Afghanistan, And Dad was a successful businessman. He sold beverages. The family started with spring water. They had and lost an Orange Crush franchise during the Depression. He bounced back after World War II, where he served in the Middle East. He ran supply trains from Basra to Crimea. And his bounce back was he was an early developer of frozen concentrated orange juice. So he sold that business to Minute Maid, which was owned by Coca-Cola. And part of the deal was it included a Coca-Cola bottling franchise in a small town in Northwest Ohio. He was also an active Democrat in a Republican machine town. I grew up in Cincinnati. So he kind of stood out in that respect. And he wrote checks to JFK and he wrote checks to LBJ. And his friend became the Secretary of Commerce. And he went on a junket to Kabul in 1965. And he was offered the opportunity to open the first Coke bottling shop in Kabul. So he came back, and consider I'm 11 or 12, all right? There were two key things that he told me. He said, Peter, this country is way too corrupt. I could never do business there.
You meant America or Afghanistan?
Afghanistan.
Oh, okay.
But a good question.
Yeah.
And his second point was that it is not really a country. It is a group of warlords who have shifting control over certain geographical zones. So that was my first exposure. And I had to go to the Rand McNally and look up, where the fuck Afghanistan was. And today, I think many Americans would have to look it up on their Google Maps because most people don't have a clue. So it has been a country that was in the dark ages and has only had moments of exception. One of those was when it was controlled by the Soviets, where it wasn't a free country, but women were not discriminated against because communism promotes atheism. The Muslim aspects were suppressed. Women didn't wear burqas. But the tribal influences were what, together with the U.S. support of the Mujahideen, brought down the Soviets when they had to lumber out of Afghanistan in 1986 or so. And I want to point out on Sunday nights, I'm a recovering DJ, and I post a bunch of songs on Facebook. And last night, I posted a satirical song by one of my favorite British post-punk bands, The Stranglers. And they did a series of songs about a mythical character named Vladimir, who was a Russian soldier. And the song that I posted last night is called Vladimir and the Beast. And anybody can find it on YouTube. And it mocks the Russians for their failure to understand the culture of the country. And Vladimir becomes hooked on hashish while he's there. So it has an element of humor. But what it points out is that the U.S. repeated the same failures that we could have learned from the Soviets if we wanted to have a successful occupation. And that, of course, is a misguided mission to begin with. But the failure to understand the cultural factors there, including what we capitalized on when we invaded to get Osama bin Laden in late 2001. What was the first thing we did? We hired a warlord named Dostum, who proceeded to gun down a bunch of his Taliban enemies. He put them in shipping containers and then just, dropped grenades or used machine guns to slaughter them. It will not be forgotten. And the Taliban will be extracted.
It won't be forgotten in Afghanistan.
Right. And the revenge.
America, it's not even known.
Right. But the revenge will be extracted. And the ability of these warlords and their fighters to shift alliances overnight is really the fundamental reason that the Afghan army cratered so quickly and made Joe Biden look really stupid for those rosy predictions that he made back in July after he met with Ashraf Ghani for the You're on Your Own Kid meeting, which was in June. So, yes, this was predictable. Like everyone else.
Has Ghani told the Afghan people that they're on their own? Has he left?
He left.
Yeah.
We don't know his whereabouts. He didn't leave a message. Maybe he tweeted, but I don't follow Twitter anymore.
He went to Harvard. I'm pretty sure he went to Harvard.
Well, he's a World Bank guy. And a professor at USF, Stephen Zunis, posted an op-ed that Ashraf Ghani posted in around 1989, saying that the puppet government, the Soviet-backed government, had vanished and had left Afghanistan. So that's a pretty interesting little relic of history.
They say that Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. Are we going to have such luck? Do you think that we will give up our imperial ambitions now?
No. And particularly, let me parse this a couple of things. First of all, like any human being, I feel the suffering present and impending of the people who were liberated in Afghanistan, many of whom sucked millions, if not billions of dollars in U.S. taxpayer money as they educated their daughters and lived a much more modern and evolved lifestyle. And they are going to suffer, and it's brutal. The scene of that U.S. transport plane taking off in Kabul today with hordes of people hovering around it on the runway, the people who got locked out of this flight, including two people who climbed onto the plane and then plummeted to the ground as it took off.
Almost as bad as Spirit Airlines. Sorry. I know. Sorry.
It's too early for that, but I join you in the spirit of your comment. I hate Spirit and I will never fly it again. But this is a highly predictable event. This is a deferred outcome because Bush wouldn't do it. Obama not only wouldn't do it, but he surged twice in a hopeless effort to turn things around. And we knew that the claims of 300,000 armed Afghans under the control of the Kabul government was bullshit. We knew from the Washington Post expose over the last several years that was based on the SIG-INT, the Special Inspector General, who exposed it's hundreds of billions that we squandered in training up, paying, and arming the Afghan military. And it's a mystery to me why we gave up the keys to the Bagram Air Base before we actually got out. But we're now consigned to using the commercial airport. And the Taliban is running checkpoints of these desperate people who are trying to get on the next American flight out. But we knew that the 300,000 number wasn't real. There were plenty of people who were getting paid for ghost jobs. And again, coming back to the culture of Afghanistan, it's predictable to anybody. And I'm delighted that Professor Cole is going to join you tonight. I've been talking to Juan Cole for over 15 years, starting with during the Iraq War. He's at the University of Michigan, and I visited him there for interviews. A brilliant guy who really has a deep understanding of the landscape. And the other thing that I want to credit Juan Cole for, even before I learned that he was going to be on your show today, I had read his 6 winners and losers from the Taliban reclaiming Afghanistan. He is the only commentator who has pointed out the critical role of Pakistan. Pakistan is where the Taliban was invented. It had a long history aligned with the ISI, the CIA equivalent in Pakistan. And while there is a derivative group with a slightly different name, Professor Cole calls them Tehreek-e-Taliban, the linkage between the Afghan Taliban and the Pakistani Taliban is they are brothers in arms. And the governments of Pakistan, you remember the Pervez Musharraf, who was bought and paid for by the United States, and his successors, they have continued to tolerate this cross-border alliance of Taliban groups. And you don't hear about that in the New York Times. CNN doesn't talk about that aspect of it. Pakistan is expected to absorb many refugees, even as they're going to be largely supporting the new government in Kabul. So the misreading by the US of these historical and regional factors is really just the latest colossal blunder. And David, if I may, I took a quick look after the stock market closed today, and Wall Street is still bullish. Lockheed Martin was up $2.27, General Dynamics up $2, Northrop Grumman up $5.50. Raytheon, which produced General Austin, the current defense secretary, and his predecessor, the predecessor under Trump, Mark Esper, they were off only 11 cents. And the only loser today was Boeing, which owns McDonnell Douglas, and they were off $5, about 2%. So the market is okay. The human misery, the colossal blunders don't really affect the capitalists.
We're dealing with a large segment of the population who believe war is a constant in nature, and that if our knives aren't sharpened through war, they become dull and we become vulnerable. There are people who believe we always have to be fighting.
I agree, David. I do want to slightly counter that with my Facebook news feed, which is populated by a lot of smart and left-leaning people, shows that even average folks know the business aspect of this. They know who the profiteers were from this war. Even average people know that we had to get out and that it wouldn't be pretty. It's even uglier than anybody expected, but these are beyond the control even of a big military and empire entity like the United States.
Well, looking at it from way up in the sky from a satellite, Peter B. Collins, I have worked for people who were friendly with arms dealers, who took money writing for arms dealers, doing shows for arms dealers, who supported the war in Iraq, who believe that America needs to be killing people overseas to keep us safe here, and also believe that the military-industrial complex is a benevolent force in the world. I'm being serious. They think that they keep us safe, and there's some bad actors out there. I know.
As you know, words matter, and until the 1950s, the Pentagon was the War Department, and we euphemized it during the Cold War about calling it defense, and of course we now characterize preemptive killing of people with drone strikes as a matter of defense. And so the language that is used has led a lot of people to accept it. And I also would say that Barack Obama, I believe it's an unintended consequence. I don't want to overly demonize him as an individual.
He does a pretty good job of that himself.
He presided over a shift of the Democratic base from being against Bush's war to being in favor of Obama's broad use of drone strikes to kill people, including a lot of innocents who were bystanders. The messes that Obama created in Syria, in Libya, and we have seen the shift to where the Democrats are now a pro-war party, particularly if you can find a cause to take on Russia. And so that is a stunning shift that is one of the big surprises of my lifetime.
From 30,000 feet looking down, can you understand how people like Rumsfeld, Cheney, Obama, although he won't admit it, believe that war is a permanent, that it's a state of nature?
Well, Rumsfeld and Cheney are in special...
There are always enemies out there.
Right, but Rumsfeld and Cheney are in a special category of neocon hawk. And Obama is more of a pragmatist, but he clearly campaigned as a peace candidate and presided over a very hawkish administration. And many people find that very hard to accept. When you say it, they're shocked. They think that you're making things up. But the reality is pretty clear to me.
Yeah, the mistake I keep making is thinking they're going to get it. Like they're going to understand. They're finally going to understand our way of thinking. They're going to come around. And I'm going to play you. I play this over and over again because it's why people throw punches. This is Bill Kristol with Katrina Vanden Heuvel, who we love, right? We're fans of her.
Generally, yes.
Maybe not her family. I think she comes from the Wasserman fortune, the MCA fortune. I think she married into Lou Wasserman's family. We'll end on this. This is Bill Kristol being challenged on... let me just fix something here. Let me find it. I can watch this over and over again because it explains to me, Bill Kristol's reaction to all this just explains everything to me.
Sitting next to Bill Kristol, man. I mean, the architects of a catastrophe that have cost this country trillions of dollars, thousands of lives, there should be accountability. We should not, if there are no regrets for the failed assumptions that have so grievously wounded this nation, I don't know what happened to our politics and media accountability, but we need it, Bill, because this country should not go back to war. We don't need armchair warriors. And if you feel so strongly, you should, with all due respect, enlist in the Iraqi army.
That's a very cute line, Katrina.
But it's real.
Look at
the displaced.
Thousands of people being killed. Can I just make a point?
A million Iraqis have been displaced. You read that story, humanitarian aid for what we have done to that country is a crime.
We have done to that country.
We're a nation of ex-wives, is what we are, who refuse to admit we're wrong. What are we up against here? I mean, what these people? There's nothing you could say to Bill Kristol that would give him a sleepless night.
You're right. No, he is beyond reach. David, before I go, I would like to just invite your listeners and viewers to watch the coverage on the PBS NewsHour, because they made a rare exception and brought on an important voice, a conservative man who I have a lot of respect for, and that's Andrew Bacevich. He's a retired Army colonel.
On the show. Yeah, I've had him on the show.
Professor of history from Boston U, and also now runs the Quincy Institute.
Gold Star dad. His son passed away. Got killed in Iraq. Didn't get passed. Yeah,
you're correct. And I've had many great conversations with Bacevich, and the NewsHour, I have a lot of criticism of, because they, particularly in recent years, have left out critical voices. But he was presented tonight in a panel with one other person, And he came through very strongly. And he is a critic of this long arc of American interventions and regime change operations. He comes at it from the conservative and pro-military perspective. And I think
he's wrote a book about conservatism, as a matter of fact. He's a conservative.
Yeah. So I just want to recommend that because it's a rare moment on the NewsHour where I think an important voice is heard at the moment it needs to be heard.
Great. Will you come back next week? I love having you. Thank you,
Sure,
Tom
David.
Weber. It is an honor to have you on the show. Peter B. Collins.
It's my pleasure, David. I enjoy it very much. And I'm getting a lot of good feedback from people who are your fans.
Yes, and my arm is tired from writing all those letters. I have peterbcollins.com. Thank you so much, Peter B. Collins. Well, what a night.